let's go back to the question, Door Talks. I don't know if Door Talks is still there. They asked, I'm not an anarchist, so why don't you believe in free will? I don't know. I definitely see a link between anarchism and free will. Oh, you're here. There you go. Perfect. I do see a link between anarchism and the lack of belief in free will. But I don't think you need to be an anarchist to not believe in free will. I've talked about it a bit before. And to summarize or to simplify the argument against free will, or why I don't believe in free will. Okay, there's two arguments that I'm going to give. First, I don't believe we have sufficient evidence to believe that we have free will. Right? The positive claim has the burden of proof. So saying we have free will, we need to give evidence as to why we believe we have free will, but we don't. There's only two sorts of arguments in favor of free will. One is that God gave it to us. There's this God-given will that allows us to do good or wrong, and it's how God can judge us. Because if we don't have free will, how can God judge us if we don't make our own choices, right? But I don't believe in God, so I don't believe that this. And then you'd have to prove God to prove free will, and you can't prove God either. So the burden of proof is just displaced to a higher being, to even a higher burden of proof. The second argument for free will is one from instinct. So we feel like we have free will, but to me, the argument of instinct is not sufficient enough to prove that free will exists. We have a lot of instincts about the world that are completely wrong. If you look at the horizon, you will think that it's flat, and therefore, instinctively, if you don't know anything about the Earth, with your instinct, you will think that the Earth is flat. Shut the fuck up, flat earthers. I know pyro-anarchists are probably flat earthers in chat, just because they're contrarian, just because they're edgy. But instinctively, the Earth is flat. And instinctively, the sun rises and sleeps, goes to bed, goes down. And therefore, instinctively, we think that the sun revolves around the Earth. That's not the case. So the argument from instinct doesn't, at least to me, doesn't make sense. To me, there's not sufficient evidence to say that free will, or to state that free will exists. And because there are so many consequences to the belief in free will, there are many consequences. Free will justifies our punishment as a form of justice in a way. Because if you believe that people are actually if you think that people have free will, then you would be justified in thinking, well, they are responsible for their actions. If you don't believe in free will, you might think that the responsibility for their actions, for their choices, is a little less blurry, right? And therefore, your answers to unethical or asocial actions might be different according to if you believe in free will or not. If you believe that someone murders, if you do believe in free will, you think that this person made the wrong choice because they're bad people, right? If you don't believe in free will, you have to understand that this choice came from an amount of variables that go beyond this person's ability or this person's own agency. And because of that, you would treat the situation very differently. But we never really had that discussion because we've traditionally always believed in God and we believed in free will. But if we don't believe in free will, so many things in society needs to be re-examined. Justice is a huge one. Another one is inequality, economic and social inequality. One of the reasons why we believe that racism is so bad, and one of the reasons we think sexism is so bad, is because there are immutable characteristics. One does not choose to be a woman. One does not choose to be black. So why would we treat people who for characteristics that they did not choose? And because of that, we fight for these civil rights. But we see economic disparity. We see people who are poor, and we attribute very often we say that it's their fault in a way. And to say that people's poverty and also their affluence, if they're rich, it's also their fault. Well, that comes from free will. If you don't believe in free will, you'll say that someone who's rich or someone who's poor is not poor because they made the right decisions. Or, well, I mean, they did make the right decisions, but because they have some kind of, basically, if you don't believe in free will, you believe that they didn't have a choice in what they did and how they became, in what situation they are now, if that makes sense. So all that being said, if you don't believe in free will, the whole structure of society needs to be re-examined. And we just simply don't have enough evidence to believe that there is free will. And therefore, I think we should re-examine those parts of society that assume free will. Meritocracy assumes free will. Our justice system assumes free will. But I don't think it's safe to make that assumption, especially since we don't have the required evidence to make that assumption. So that's the first argument. The second argument is more of a positive one, right? The first one is to say, we don't know, but there's not sufficient proof to say that there actually is. But the second argument I'll give is about how we actually know that we don't have free will. Okay, there's maybe a third. I'll go with the third really quickly. There's the scientific argument, which personally, like, there's a lot of scientific arguments about how choices are often made even before consciousness. We would need a neuroscientist to talk about that. There's the whole idea of causality. Everything in the world, everything as far as we know, is either causal or, I always forget that word, quantum mechanics or whatever. I don't know anything about quantum mechanics, but from what I understand about quantum mechanics, it's that it's random. There's a randomness. There's a random element, and it's not all causal. But whether it's causal or random, there's no space in either of these two for free will, because free will would either, well, it can't be random because it comes from a will, but it can't be causal because again, it comes from a will. It doesn't come from prior variables. That's the scientific argument that I'm not going to go into because I don't know the science enough. The philosophical argument, that's the second one. The scientific one was the third one. The scientific argument, which to the philosophical argument, which to me is the most convincing, is the argument that we only do as we want, right? We'll only do what we want. And we don't choose what we want. We cannot unwant something unless different variables come into play. So let's say I want chocolate ice cream over vanilla ice cream. I can't say, actually, I want vanilla ice cream. Because the want is not something that you will. The want is something that comes from inside of you. If somehow the chocolate ice cream was less healthy than the vanilla ice cream, then you can say, oh, I want the taste of the chocolate ice cream, but I want the healthy benefits of vanilla ice cream. And then those two wants will compete. Which want is stronger than the other, right? Do you want the taste or do you want the health? But the strength of each want is again beyond your control. You don't choose which one you prefer, right? It just is there. If you choose the health, and if they're really close, you might be very, very confused and you might not even know which one you want, right? You might be really, really torn. Do I want the health? Do I want the taste? But eventually the decision you'll make, the decision you'll make, either it's random, you'll just toss a coin, or you'll go with one of the two. And if you go with one of the two, it'll be probably the one that you actually want the most. And that's how I believe all choices are made. Let's say you want to commit a crime, right? So there's a want there to commit a crime. But there's also the want to be free, to not be arrested by the cops and put into jail, right? There's also the want to not be excommunicated by your family. There's not the want to be shamed by your family, your friends, and to be hated by your community. There's many reasons why you wouldn't want to commit a crime, right? So there's these two wants that are competing. And there's many different variables. So it's different wants like that you can't even compute in your head. So do I want to commit a crime? Or do I want to conserve my communal, familial, and friendship bonds? One of the reasons why a lot of people don't choose to do crime is because they want the other things, right, more. And I think that's the argument for free will in terms of philosophy, in terms of wants and desires, can be boiled down to that. I will watch with you. Let's watch something together. It's a video from 5 years ago. The whole idea of want and desires didn't come from me. It came from Alex O'Connor, who was cosmic skeptic and who changed it like this week. My initial reasons to not believe in free will are different from these. It came from another experience that I had, or another discussion. But I believe that this one is probably the most convincing because it's the simplest one, and it's probably the most concise one that I can think of. And that if someone doesn't understand why someone would not believe in free will, I think this is the best explanation. It's basically what I just said, but because this is scripted and because this is comes from someone who is, I believe, more versed in the topic than me. We'll look it up.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alex, and perhaps because of my impending examinations and the very real possibility of failure, I've been thinking a lot about the concept of free will and whether any of us can really be held accountable for our actions. Now, one of the best-known current critics of free will is, of course, Sam Harris, whose short book you should all read. It's what really got me thinking about this originally about a year ago, and who is, of course, a neuroscientist. But
Free Will by Sam Harris is actually a pretty good book. We can criticize Sam Harris for different reasons, but his book on free will, I've read it a couple of times, and I was always pretty convinced by it. Maybe I should revisit it as with a bit more of a critical eye. But if I remember correctly, it was a really, really good book. And we can criticize Sam Harris for different things, but his take on free will is pretty strong, if I remember correctly again. Let's go back to the video.
So with that out of the way, let's get into this. Here is my case against free will. Now, the first issue that we have to face is, of course, the definition of free will. And since when I'm debating this, I'm the one who's denying the existence of something that someone else believes in, it really needs to be that someone else's definition that I'm using, which is why a video like this can be quite tricky. Now, this doesn't absolve me of any burden of proof. Unlike my passive atheism, I make the active claim that I think free will does not exist. But I can only do this once I'm sure that we all mean the same thing by free will. So for ease's sake, I'll go with the most succinct and least controversial definition that I've been able to come up with, which is this. Free will is the ability to have acted differently. And what I mean by this is that if we were to wind back the clock in any situation, it was completely within the realm of possibility for you to have acted differently to the way that you actually did. For instance, it would have been completely possible for me to have said bonjour at the beginning of this video instead of good morning.
If he said bonjour at the beginning of the video, it would have been a objectively better video, obviously, and people in chat can agree. And I was also answering Alexandra, who said leftist Ben Shapiro, which is kind of funny, but I don't think he's leftist. I don't think Alex O'Connor is leftist. At least I haven't gotten a leftist vibe from him in his videos. Sorry for interrupting because of he was speaking French.
And the choice to say the latter was completely within my control. The idea is that you are in control of your actions, and any decisions that you make are determined only by your own conscious self. But the thing is, there are so many things wrong with this that it's difficult to know where to start. I'll borrow a line of thought from Dr. Harris here. Let's begin by considering what would have to be true in order for us to truly have total free will, to be able to have acted differently. Well, firstly, we would need to be aware of everything that is influencing our actions, including environmental factors, our precise mood, the influence of other people, the influence of past experiences, and more. Secondly, we would need to be in complete control of every one of them. Neither of these are true or even possible. Consider this most simple of choices, chocolate or vanilla. Or, if it's easier, consider the last mundane choice that you had to make. Walk or drive this morning, go out or stay in tonight. Think about why you chose one or would choose one over the other. So what would make me choose vanilla over chocolate? Well, there is only one possible answer, which I'll elaborate on shortly. I would need to want it more than chocolate. In order to choose vanilla, I'd need to want vanilla. But is this something I can control? Can I control what it is that I want? Not a chance. Consider the fact that you, presumably, don't want to punch your mother in the face. Can you choose to want to do that? This isn't the same thing as choosing to do it. Could you choose to want to? No, no more than I could choose to want vanilla over chocolate. I just want chocolate more than vanilla. That's just a fact about myself that I can't change. The key takeaway is this: you cannot determine your wants. Think of something you want. Try to not want it. Think of something you don't want and try to want it. It's not possible. And even
I might ruin this video for you. I've watched this video a lot of times. When I when I had discussions about free will, I would go back to this video. You can't really see right now. If you ever watch that video again without me, let me hide myself. You know, I've seen this commented before, and I thought it was really funny. You know that Alex O'Connor is big brain, because look how big his books are behind him. If this is the floor that we see behind him, and these are the books that are on his floor and are piled up, those are huge ass books.
And if it were, in order to change a don't want into a want, you'd need to want it. And vice versa, to change a want into a don't want, you'd need to want to not want it.
The bigger the books, the bigger the brain. La Terese says it's not the floor. No, it is the floor. When he reads a book, he puts the book on his lap like this, and then he opens it like this and starts reading. And then when he turns a page, he turns it like this. Either the books are really big, or Alex O'Connor is actually very, very, very small. Which is possible as well, right? So as far as I know, he's really small and petite. Very possible.
You simply can't control what you want. Now, that's one piece of the puzzle, and it may seem odd to leave it there, but just wait until we put them together. Okay, the next piece of the puzzle is to convince you of this fact, that there are...
Maybe he's as small as Ben Shapiro. We all want Alex O'Connor in our left pocket and Ben Shapiro in our right pocket. And then when we need to make decisions, we put them on our shoulders, and then each of them whisper in our ear. Ben Shapiro says some right-wing cringe stuff, and then Cosmic Skeptic, I don't know his political tendencies, but he says stuff as well. And then you make your decisions as they sit on your shoulder. All right, enough with this. It's weird.
Only two reasons, none more in any circumstances, for which you will ever do anything. In fact, it's impossible for you to ever do anything for any reason other than one of these two. And those two reasons are because you want to or because you're forced to. And this is fundamentally important and worth really understanding and thinking about. You will only ever do anything in your entire life because you either want to or are forced to. That's it. No exceptions. And because of the fact that nobody seems to believe me on this point at first, I'll give you a common objection that I hear all the time. In fact, I recently spoke to ex-NFL player Arian Foster about free will on his podcast. Link again will be in the description once it's up. And he, playing devil's advocate, brought up the following. Consider exercise. Consider going to the gym. Most people don't want to go to the gym, but they do it anyway. Surely this is an example of someone doing something freely and not because they want to or because they're forced to.
So what would be the answer to that? If you understood the argument correctly, you would be able to know what Alex is going to answer. If someone says, if I only do things because I want to because I'm forced, well, why would I go work out if like I don't really want to work out? What will be the answer? What's the rebuttal? Come on, chat. I need you to be big brain. I need. This is going to be a segment. I need you to impress people on the channel. If you don't get the answer, I only read small books, so I have small brain. And we're failing this exam. God. All right. So you know what? Never mind. Never mind, chat. People on YouTube watching this, you need to come on Twitch when I do my streams. Because these people, see, they're not paying attention. Small brain, failing the exam. These people are embarrassing. I can't. I'm kidding. You're not embarrassing. I really thank you for being here. Please stay. So the NFL player says a lot of people go to the gym, but they don't want to go to the gym, right? Well, I would argue, and I imagine Alex is going to do it, because I haven't watched this video in a while, but I've watched it so many times before in the past. He's going to say, well, your want for being in health, your want for having your physique or whatever, there's competing wants, as I was talking about earlier. There's competing wants, and your desire or your want to be fit, your want to be physically, there's different reasons as to why you want to go to the gym, right? And yes, you might not want to go to the gym, but your wants to be fit, your wants to be healthy, your wants to be attractive your want to make your body look as you want it to look, right, is stronger than your unwant to go to the gym, right? But if you understand it in terms of competing wants, right? I don't want this, but I'm still doing it's because you actually want something out of it, right? Like, why do I go to work if I don't want to go to work? Well, it's because I want to feed myself with the money that the work is giving me, right? Everything that you do has an underlying want that forces you in a way to do it, or that compels you to do it. Think of anything that you don't want to do. Most of you in chat, I know that most of you in chat don't want to take showers and you don't want to bathe, but you still do. And the reason why you do is because there's another competing want that gets stronger the stinkier you get. It's that you're afraid that people will judge you. You're afraid that people will judge you for being stinky. So you don't want to take a bath or a shower, and you'll push it back as long as possible until eventually the want to not be ostracized and hated by the public becomes stronger than you not wanting to take a shower. And then you take the shower, even though you don't actually want to take it. Your want to be to not feel stinky in front of other people is stronger. Nitai says, but does that not invoke free will in the want to be fit? Well, that's the argument. The argument is that if you the want to be fit is not a want that you control. You just want to be fit. You can't unwant to be fit. It's just the case that you want to be fit, right? It's not something that you control. And there's different variables as to why you want to be fit, right? It can be if you and those variables are beyond your control and maybe sometimes beyond your comprehension. The reason why you want to be fit could be social acceptance, could be health, it could be social pressure to do it. It could be a need to be attracting to some other people. If you feel lonely, it could be very, very different reasons to want to be fit, or very different variables, which you might not even be aware of, right? But all you know is that you want to be fit. You might be aware of the variables, right? Some people, they want to be fit, they know because they want to look good. And why do you want to look good? Well, it's because either you want to feel better in your body, you want to feel better about yourself, you want someone else, but all of these wants, wanting to feel good in your body, it's not something that you control, right?
Surely this is an example of someone doing something freely and not because they want to or because they're forced to. Not really. Because there has to be a reason for going to the gym. And for most people, and for Arian, it's something like to stay healthy, to stay in shape, to live longer, whatever it may be.
Alexandra says, you should react more. I'm not a very reacting person. I live my emotions and my surprise and all that very internally. That's why like I couldn't react to a funny video or something, because I'd just be there going like, that's funny. I would say that. All right, I'll try.
It's something like to stay healthy, to stay in shape, to live longer, whatever it may be. So we have to ask again the same fundamental question. Why is the desire to stay healthy stronger than the desire to go to the gym?
I don't know.
It just is. Or maybe it isn't. And some people stay at home and eat junk food instead. For these people, why is the desire to sit around or to eat junk food stronger than the desire to be healthy? It just is. Again, remember, you can't control the strengths or objects of your desires. It's they that control you.
Whoa! That was a truth bomb right there. Heads up by the head, like this. Like actually, this was a good line. That was lots of large movements. I could if I didn't like this shirt, I would rip it right now, because that was good. Oh my God! You will not believe what he said. All right. No, enough fucking around. What do you say?
Desire to be healthy. It just is. Again, remember, you can't control the strengths or objects of your desires. It's they that control you.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. So when I was talking competing desires, well, these competing desires, because we all have desires and they're all competing, right? Me streaming is a desire, but it competes with the idea of just chilling in bed or working on the video essay that I should be working on for my main channel. All those desires, right? I could be taking a walk outside. There's millions of possibilities I could be doing, right? And they're all desires with different object. Like every desire has a different object in the sense that it's very different, different situations, and they all have different intensities. But these intensities and the object of these desires are beyond my control. Streaming happened to be at the top of these desires. But yeah, you don't control the object and the strength of your desires. And because of that, you don't control what you do. Because if what you do is solely on what you want, and you don't decide what you want, then you don't decide what you do. Let's finish this video.
And if that doesn't unease you, repeat those words again to yourself until it does. So even when you don't want to do something but you do it anyway, this is only ever because of a stronger and equally uncontrollable desire to do something that requires you to do it. In other words, all of your actions really are controlled by your wants. And I really mean this. This is what really convinced me of the non-existence of free will. If you aren't convinced that everything you do is either because you want to or because you're forced to, please pause the video and just really think about this. I promise that any example you can think of has a hidden want lying behind it.
But yeah, no, I think it's an important topic, and it's an interesting one, and it's one that we can apply in our daily life in good, beneficial ways. And this is going to be the cliffhanger, because I'm going to go to the bathroom. And while I go to the bathroom, I want you to anticipate, how can this, the knowledge, how can this knowledge that free will doesn't exist, or at least this opinion or this worldview that free will doesn't exist, can impact me, my beliefs, and the way I interact with the world? Stay tuned, because the answer will surprise you. Am I doing a good job at this? It's the kind of question that a lot of people don't think about at all, because it's not the kind of question that often is asked, right? So it's important to ask the question, because often people don't actually examine their beliefs, at least for free will. because it's something that we feel like we always have anyway. So how can it impact your disbelief? How can your disbelief in free will impact you, your decision making, your interactions with the world, the way you view other people, and maybe even your politics? A lot of people will turn to being doomer, as the young people say. They'll feel like there's like a fatalism to not believing in free will, which I understand, right? If you're like, I don't make any of my choices, and how I will end up in life is the result of variables that I don't even choose. So what the fuck is the point of even interacting with the world if I don't even get to choose anything, right? So it makes it turns to a fatalism that might just make you feel like, in extreme cases, that what's the point of living? Am I even living if I can't even make my own choices, right? But I'm here to tell you, not believing free will, or because again, beliefs are not a choice either, right? You can't choose to believe something or not. So you don't even choose to believe in the fact that free will exists or not. You don't choose to believe your politics even. It's not a choice, right? It's a belief is just there. It's something that you either believe in or not. If we change the way we conceive of ourselves and our choices, I think there's an importance to say, hey, listen, it's not all doom and gloom. It's not fatalistic, right? It's easy to think that not believing free will robs you from freedom, robs you from the ability of actually living a fun life where you feel like you can interact with the world in a free way, right? But it's not the case. I've done this comparison in the past, but with God. A lot of people say, if God doesn't exist, right? If I don't believe in God anymore, I'll be lost. I'll be alone in this world. God was always there looking after me. God was there to tell me right from wrong. Without God, what stops me from doing evil, from doing wrong stuff, right? What do I turn to if I want to have agency in my life? If I want help in my life, right? So it's easy for someone who's for example Christian to see the disbelief in God as something fatalistic. Oh, you don't believe in the afterlife? So what the point is? What is the point of living, right? If after death you're just dead, you're as alive as you were before you were born, what's the point of living, right? A lot of Christians will see the death of God, or the disbelief of God, or the disbelief of the afterlife, as something very fatalistic, as something very bad, right? But you can turn it you can see it as something good, while knowing that there's no afterlife forces me to really, really enjoy the life that I'm living right now, knowing that it's finite, right? The fact that I don't have to rely on someone else to tell me good from evil, or evil from good. The fact that I don't have to go to a superpower, not a superpower, a power that's above you to tell you what's good and right. Well, I have to determine it for myself. And I have to develop my own way of interacting with the world that's much more engaging, because instead of being from revelation, it needs to come from thought and actually engagement with the world, right? So there are good things about dropping a system of belief that seems to be actually comforting. And in terms of free will, if you don't believe in free will, and here's what I'm going to be, here's how it makes you, I believe, better. If you don't believe in free will, you understand that your choices, your outcomes, will come from variables that you have no control over, right? However, just listening to me right now is a variable. I can influence your life. You can influence mine by chatting. You can influence other people's lives, and other people will influence yours, right? And with that realization, I'm giving you a new desire. I'm unlocking a desire, and maybe you already had it before, but that desire is to select and filter the variables that influence you. And once you understand that filtering and selecting the variables that will influence you and that will shape your decision making and pretty much your future, once you understand that variables basically create who you are, then you develop the desire to filter and select these variables. So now that you know that free will doesn't exist, you may want, as O'Connor was saying, you may want now to read books. You may want now to feed your brain with as much information and experiences, because you know that your choices, your actions, your behavior, your very personhood is determined by the experiences and the different variables, the information that you know, your knowledge, your experiences. Your very personhood is determined by these things. So now you can shape who you are knowingly by feeding yourself with the information that you want, right? And knowing that that free will doesn't exist is a desire, like unlocks a desire for you to feed your personhood with variables that you want to shape your world with, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. But to me, I see it as extremely liberating. I see it as a way of developing an identity in a more concrete way, right? You can develop an identity freely, right? You're alone in the world. You're free. You can do whatever you want, and you believe your identity is a creation of your own volition. But understand that your identity is actually the creation of various variables and factors of life. Then it will make you seek out as many factors of life, as many variables as you can consume, and as you can consume is a very capitalist word. As you can absorb inside your being to create the most nuanced, the most detailed version of yourself that you can. Because you can't do that from your own volition, from your own freedom, right? Because your brain is as limited as the amount of information that you give it, as the amount of experiences that you give it. So knowing that free will doesn't exist makes it so that you have now all the reasons to become the better version of yourself. Because now you know how to do it. And how to do it is by, again, amassing knowledge, amassing information about the world, amassing experiences, right? Do things that you've never done or you've never thought you'd be doing, because that will influence the way you make decisions and will influence your very being as a person. And I think that helps give you back the agency that you think you might have lost by not believing in free will. Because again, you don't get to choose what you want, right? You just do as you want. But once you have the want to develop your personality, to develop your identity, and if you know that free will doesn't exist, then this want is going to make you get more variables that will better inform you on the wants that, that are better for you. All of that, I feel like I repeated myself a lot, but I hope that this makes sense. Temer is really right in saying movies are linear and predetermined well before I watch them. I still enjoy watching film. Experiences are worthy on their own. Absolutely. That's a really nice way to say it. Good job. Now to talk about the political aspect of not believing free will. I've had a discussion with Anarch, right? The discussion with Anarch is on YouTube if you ever want to watch it on Germinal. It's also on Anarch's channel. We talked about free will, and we talked about how, if I remember correctly, we talked about how free will actually made me. It was one of the factors as to how or why I became an anarchist, because not believing free will makes it so that you think, all right, people will act uncooperatively if they're incentivized to live uncooperatively. And I believe that we should be as cooperative as possible, because the more we're cooperative, the more happy we'll be, the more unalienated we tend to be, the freer we become, we tend to be, because competition forces us to do things that we don't want to do. Cooperation is positive. Competition is negative, at least in my worldview. And that turned me to anarchism in many different, like through very different ways. But understanding that people are the result of variables that are beyond their choosing made me think, all right, well, let's make it so that the variables that are out in the world are as best as possible to develop everybody's potential as best as possible. Because everybody's potential, if it's developed, is going to affect me in a very positive way as well. Because again, other people are variables to how I can develop myself. So if my community is freed, then I'm free. Bakunin wrote this. A lot of anarchists believe this. So I became an anarchist because of my disbelief in free will for those reasons. I believe that when it comes to people's beliefs and people's actions as well, not believing free will forces you to develop an empathy, forces you to develop a critical eye as to why people believe or why people act the way they do. Right? So if someone is right wing, right? There's reasons why they're right wing. There's reason beyond this person that they're right wing. The same way there's reasons beyond me that I'm left wing. And trying to understand with empathy why these people are there, and it forces you to also understand the variables and perhaps tap on these variables to convince someone or to sway someone one way or another, right? So if you understand that someone is more right wing because of I don't know, nationalism as one of the strong contributors to why they're right wing, well, perhaps you can discuss nationalism and try to break it down and deconstruct it with that person if they're open to it, right? So that's something that's possible as well. Understanding that there's no free will also forces you to adopt a systemic analysis of social problems, because now social problems are not the Christian argument that if there's evil in the world is because people make evil decisions. It can't be God, right? It's just because people make evil decisions. It's people's choices. The problem is because we gave them free will. But when you don't believe in free will, where does suffering comes from? Where does it come from? Where does suffering, evil, blah, 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 all these things, where does it come from? It forces you to adopt a systemic analysis of the world to try to understand why people behave the way they do, why systems incentivize behaviors the way they do, and things like that. There's so many things, so many benefits to not believing in free will. So now you get a different outlook on why people believe the way they do, but how they act the way they do as well. So you can look at crime in general, right? A lot of crime, and especially crime, for example, that come from the bourgeoisie, rich people. Why does crime happen, right? Is it because they're too greedy, because they're evil or whatever? Well, the reason why they do crime is because they're incentivized to do crime. If you build a system that rewards amassing wealth, well, people will amass wealth at whatever cost possible. And understanding that these choices of trying to amass wealth as much as possible at the expense of the well-being of others, understanding that if a system rewards that, people will do that. Because people don't have free will. So this is why I don't believe in free will, and that's why I believe that it's beneficial to not believe in free will. I'm sure there are other reasons why you shouldn't. But to go back to my main one, I believe, the one that's the most important the main reason why you shouldn't believe in free will is because I think it enables a better understanding of systemic problems and a better understanding of why you are the way you are. And even more importantly, it unlocks the potential for you to create the best version of yourself in a very self-help kind of way.